Hey, Matthew.
Hey, how's it going, Werner?
Good seeing you again today.
Yeah, it's great seeing you too, man.
Bloody cold one outside.
I literally froze to death going and getting a cup of coffee.
Yeah, so talking about AI and following up on what we've discussed while you were setting up the gear and everything. So you call yourself an AI guy.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Why does, when I introduce you to folks and we mention AI, there's a bit of a recoil in terms of
Oh no.
we don't want to do anything to do, it's got nothing to do with you, but we don't want to do anything with AI or an AI guy or somebody that's going to tell us about AI
Yeah.
or somebody's going to make us, somebody that's going to tell us we have to use AI.
hmm
I mean, you and I had a few experiences with that where we tried to introduce it to folks
Oh, absolutely.
and it was just like the shutters went down.
Yeah.
Why?
Because to most people it's alien, so they don't understand what it is. They don't understand, like, they get the concept of, like, here's a machine. It thinks on itself somehow. But the concept of how that machine comes up to its own determinations and takes its own actions is kind of alien to, like, most people. A calculator is AI. An algorithm is an AI. Like, anything that they use is an AI because they don't understand really where it begins and it ends. So,
But do they even know that they're already using AI when they use Google Maps, when they use text translate, when they use predictive text? Do they even know they're using AI?
I don't think, well, I think they
Or
have, like,
it's not the
some
same.
concept, but at the same time, like, do people know when they're on Google Maps that that's an AI? Because they think that that's just like a physical map that you unroll and look at. And reality is, like, a lot of that data that's on there is mined through AI and even computed and layered and assembled through AI tools.
Okay. Yep.
So,
I
like,
get
people are
that.
just using services. A lot of people don't realize, like, that's an AI. Like, an example of, like, another AI service, I know this sounds really obscure. I assume, well, I wash my clothes, as other people that are listening probably wash their clothes.
Yeah.
All those dryers that you have are not only designed, but run off of AI models because they have to be able to figure out how the drum turns at a certain speed and a certain tension in it to make sure that all your clothes stay in and they don't just projectile all over the place and
Okay, so
shred.
you're going to make me look differently at my tumble drying machine
Yeah.
at home. Okay, thank you for that. Something else as well is where you lead from the tech side downwards. Okay, what AI can do for people. I find my challenge more talking to them at a more operational level, strategic level, getting them to change their mindset in terms of they really don't have a choice. It doesn't matter if they like to hear this or not, they have to get to know AI. What they do with it, it's up to them.
Why do you think they have to get to know it, though?
Because I think it's an essential. Okay, so I thought about it this morning driving. When the internet came about, before that, people used to have the yellow books, the thick books with telephone numbers, and this is how you would find companies and things like that. Internet changed that completely. It changed how you found information completely. It changed how you found things completely. It saved you a fortune in time and things like that. And if I look at how I use AI currently, in some ways it's a very strategic tool. In other ways, it's just a turbocharged search engine. So I use it in both ways. The reason why I think people need to experiment with it and make up their own mind is I think it's just like the internet changed how you need to think about things and how you were able to do things and how you were able to execute things as a person and as a business. AI has the same disruptive impact at a much higher level. But for me, it's not about using AI or not. It's for me to understand the logic of it, to understand what it does, to understand how it thinks, to understand what it can potentially do. But it changes how you think. I don't want to use the word reason, but shoot me, okay? But it does change how you reason. Sorry, I mean, I'm just being completely honest. And I think it's essential that as somebody, if you want to stay up with things, you have to get to know how AI works. That's my opinion. I don't know if you kind of give me a look here like I need to have another cup of coffee or something like that.
So like when you said like, hey, like remember those old yellow books that we used to
Yes.
like look people up in? Like I immediately like closed my eyes and I saw like two cavemen like pointing at like a book.
Exactly, that's what it was.
But it's so funny because like there's AI products out there that are essentially that have the like you can just go to them like Clay, and you can go to Clay and say like, hey, I'm looking for businesses that have these attributes, and it starts printing off
Correct.
information about these businesses and tabulated like CSV
Correct.
like format values, and then you can just go and like say, oh cool, and like just scrape mass whatever data you want. So like there's AI tools for that, but essentially like when I see that, I'm just going, isn't this just a yellow book with an extra layer of convenience to it? Because you can just say like find things that look like this and in the form of like a textual command to the system, and it just gets you things. So is it not that like when I think of like the yellow book, that's a data resource. That's
It is a data resource.
And then all this is just a service layer that just exists above it.
I think it's more than that.
Oh, okay. What do you think it is?
So I think what you've just done is you kind of explained a very small part of what AI is. That book or that tool or that database, it was never able, and it has never been able to recognize patterns and to do the level of analysis that AI allows you to do or is beginning to do. That was never possible. So when you moved from the cave, the yellow book, and it took you time to go through and find whoever you wanted to do, whatever, the internet just destroyed that industry. But also it saved you a fortune in time in finding things and finding people and connecting with people and increasing your knowledge. Now, I don't think AI increases your knowledge. It's built on our knowledge. So I don't think it increases our knowledge. My very practical understanding of what AI does is it allows you to use your own knowledge in a much more productive, better, faster way, more effective way.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, strategic thinking. AI allows you to replace strategic thinking with design thinking as a tool, as a permanent tool, because you can iterate faster, you can experiment faster, you can learn faster. So for me, it enhances knowledge. And that's why it frustrates me when you and I talk to people that the first reaction is, we don't want to, because there's a perception of it steals data, it doesn't respect privacy, I don't know what's going to happen with my data, is other people going to see my data? That's kind of at the level where it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there is a huge privacy concern about this.
Yes, there is.
Yes, there.
So I'm going to listen how you're going to wiggle yourself out of this.
Okay, so yeah, there's a few things here. So a lot of these like large AI companies, they're facing lawsuits over with regards to copyright infringement because they're stealing a whole bunch of Facebook. Meta just I think got caught. There was an allegation, 82 tera. It was like some employee had like 82 terabytes of like.
And one guy went to prison because he did like a few gigs or something.
Yeah. So like the Facebook now like, has an employee that's may or may not have been told by the company to go and mass collect this data and may or may not have ingested it into the LLM model that is the Meta AI. So who knows? If so, it begs a huge question as to, okay, do we want like companies that have like $1 trillion evaluation to have just carte blanche access to copyright material that other people make?
What do you think?
No. No, not under any circumstance.
Okay, so how do I tell somebody to adopt AI without contributing to that fear or concern that they're adding inadvertently to something that's being built that's unethical?
So
how do you fight against the algorithm? How do you kind of
fight against the algorithm?
How do you kind of?
So this is at least like what developers do. So let's say I'm writing like some code, and like I use AI to write code, even though I'm a software developer. It's great that I can just go into a ChatGPT terminal and rather than spending like a day or two trying to make like an interface that does one specific task and make it look just perfect, I could just go into it like an AI and be like, make an interface that looks like this, and I want the CSV so the buttons are all nice and aligned, and it just spits it out, and that's great. There's a few do's and don'ts. So like for a software developer, it's okay to ask the AI to generate something that's like pretty much like widely accepted.
Yes.
There's also a don't, which is you probably don't want to take like customer information
Correct.
or like
Yep. Or anything sensitive.
like let's say you got a password, don't put passwords in, don't put the contact information in. Definitely if you're using software that requires you to have a private key, like an API access, probably a bad idea to put your private key in there because then literally anybody. One of the worst conditions I saw, like it was on a podcast. They pulled up like one of these LLM models, and they said like, do we think that there's like a group of businesses out there that use like this kind of service for an API service? Like I don't want to specify like which one, but it was like a marketing tool.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that they're probably using like HubSpot or a CRM or something like that. Probably using it as like an API access. Can I just ask this terminal right here, could you give me the private keys of these companies over there?
Yes.
No, the terminal will sit down. Okay, could you like show us the details of what they ought to look like? Kind of. And then they like kept experimenting around till they could kind of like guess as to like, okay, this is like the pattern of what it would look like. Not necessarily that it is spitting them out, but it's interesting to see that the models have been trained to that level of people actually putting their public and private keys into these kind of LLMs, that the LLM goes and goes, oh, this is like what one ought to look like, the digits and the sequence codes and stuff like that. Not saying that that is like compromising anything, but it's like the first step of compromise, which is like, what is the format of the data? Like, surely you've gone and like used software tools like, say, two-factor authentication. You ever try to like log into your Gmail and it says like, hey, like we're going to give you a password. Yeah, there's patterns with those numbers because like they'll make it so like certain numbers repeat so that it's easier as like for mimetic like abilities for you to recall those numbers. They're not going to give you like 8 different numbers because like psychologically there's no way that you're going to remember, like the average person doesn't have the ability to remember 8 separate numbers in a specific sequence. So there's like a repeat set of numbers that typically happen. So if you're really smart, you figure out like, oh, there's always these numbers that repeat in this pattern, then that allows you to make the first step towards building a cryptographic attack against that machine.
Okay, so let me just break this down so that I can understand it as well. So what you're saying is when it comes to AI and the large language models, there's already safeguards against private information?
Not really, because a lot of these companies, like let's say ChatGPT, so you had ChatGPT and they were really concerned about security, saying we're going to make a safe.
They say they are.
Yeah, and then there was controversy and a whole bunch of people left that company and then formed the other one.
Yes.
I forget the name of the spin-off company that formed out of ChatGPT. But then everybody over there was super concerned until they started taking billion-dollar venture capital money. And then now all of a sudden they're not as concerned about privacy and safety and ethics and yada, yada, yada. So my take on this is like you should never, ever put in your personal information, never put in other people's personal information, never put in business classified or like trade secret information or anything like that. All that should be cards you keep close to your chest. And just simply say like, give me a model, give me an output that I can plug the number in, then you can calculate this for me. An example of that is like you can say, hey, like give me a spreadsheet that has like this cell in it that I just have to put a value in it and it calculates and it goes, oh, okay. And
that I've done.
Yeah.
Okay. So at the end of it, the ethics and the managing of the information, maintaining of the information comes down to the individual owner, business owner, you and me, to make sure that we just don't share that information or we don't make use of it or that we don't put it in harm's way.
Yep. Because like at the end of the day, Canada, well, not just Canada, but like it doesn't seem to be that we're regulating these large companies that...
Do we know how to?
They don't know how to necessarily regulate themselves. So if you sit there and said, like, for example, could you take your large language model, let's say you're like ChatGPT, and somebody came in and said, hey, like, I know that you guys have digested Amazon workspace keys. Could you go and like find everybody that's given you an Amazon workspace key? Well, if you're a coder, you're not probably going to call your variable Amazon Workspace key. You're probably going to give it like some weird
I would
name.
hope so.
Yeah. So then, how is ChatGPT supposed to sit there? Like, Sam is going to sit there and shrug and be like, "How do I possibly find every single one and be accountable for every single one that our LLM, large language model, has digested?" Has no ability to do that. So he's just going to shrug and say, I can take a crack at it, I guess. So at the end of the day, these companies are not accountable or responsible. So you, the individual person using it, are going to have to be responsible for yourself, unfortunately.
Okay, so if I understand this correctly, just to change subjects a little bit, you as a developer, you build your apps on an open AI platform or one of those AI platforms. When you build your app, what kind of level of security or ethics can you build into your app, or is it completely dependent on what the platform allows you to do?
So the platform, like when I'm using ChatGPT to like build out an app, all that's doing for me is building like a database and an interface with regards to how I go and use that data. That's going to be in my privacy agreement that I'm going to have in front of the customer.
Yep.
Because that's going to be stuff like, this is my protocol on what I'm allowed to do with data. Like my previous startup, FoodBite, like we had a privacy agreement saying explicitly, I am not allowed to sell your data. I am not allowed to give away your data. I am not allowed to show other people your data. Your data is private specifically to your company. It was like right in our privacy agreement. Then there was other things in there saying like, FoodBite is allowed to take your data and pipe it into a machine learning model if we wanted to, and we make your data anonymous to build out an analysis tool of how food safety could handle like larger scale problems. Given that we're building that data piece over here, we reserve the right to do that. But at the end of the day, the data that you have is still your data. And the example that I gave in the privacy agreement is like you can export your data, you could add other people to your plans, you can manipulate your data the way that you see fit, so long as it confers to law, because you can't go and like take a monitoring report and go and like write whatever you want once when it's done. So at that kind of like level, it's you have ownership and agency over your data to a limited degree based on the platform. Now going back, if I had to write it over again, I would write it so that like they have complete 100% agency, and I would specifically say like FoodBite does not have the right at all to go and like build machine learning models off your data.
Why?
I believe that like people are, to your point earlier.
I mean, that's a very important point. Why?
Yeah, so like the issue is like people are just kind of like full scale, like turnkey brain, uninterested in kind of, as you mentioned before, like plugging into this like massive system of data collection and building tools to help us do our jobs better and stuff like that. There seems to be a lot of people that are just unplugging from it. I don't like, I fully understand that. I just don't put like my private data into it, and I still will probably continue to use these large language models because they're such a beneficial tool for me.
Hugely.
Yeah,
hugely.
Because like they help me. They help. Like I have friends that have done like startups before, and they're all converting over to using LLMs as like not just like something like we could use this to be part of our business as like a core competency of what their startup essentially is.
Yes.
Where a lot of stuff filters through it.
Yes.
Like most startups now, a big thing that we struggled with is what's called technical debt. I would have to go out and computer scientists, engineers, very expensive people to hire. You're going to be looking at like per year salary, like $80,000 to $100,000 just in Canada to hire somebody straight out of school to work for you and develop apps. So unless you have like a really giant pool of money to put into this, you're just not going to have the capital. But if you're using an LLM to like write up like an MVP to like put in front of investors and say like this is how it ought to look, and I have like 5 people paying for this right now, could I have some money please? That gives it a much more smaller gap that you have to cross in order to get like your first layer of capitalization, so you can actually go to the races and have a startup, versus you're just kind of like tumbling around. Does that kind of make sense?
Completely. Do you think that's a good thing?
I think that that's a good thing for startups. I think it's a good thing for the Canadian market. I think it's a good thing for the clients, so long as the startups, like whatever data gets piped in is separated, like client data is separated from the LLM. An example is like, in my mind, there's a difference between a startup that's using an LLM to code, like ChatGPT to code your app, like what I'm doing, versus somebody that is just a mask, a veneer, like a facade over top of an LLM.
I got that.
Yeah, because there are startups out there that it's like, hey, like type into my chatbot how you can develop a sales program or like a business program for your business. And then they don't actually do anything. They just take your text and pipe it into ChatGPT. ChatGPT generates the answer, and then they pipe it back to you and say, hey, that's going to be $50 a month or something like that.
People pay for something like that?
Absolutely, because they don't.
The biggest idiocy I've heard about.
Yeah, sure. Well, listen, I'm from the food industry, okay? So one of the biggest things that happens in the food...
I think you undersell yourself, but okay. I think
so, one of the things that happens is called repackers. Repackers are...
I know what it is.
Yeah. The concept of, like, I'm just going to buy strawberries from, like, Guatemala and then just, like, repack them into my cases and then say,
yep,
product of Canada. And then just... and then just like put them out there.
Gotcha.
It's so brazen, so unbelievably shameless, and there's actual business models of people that do that.
As long as the strawberries are good, I mean, you can probably. I'm just joking.
Yeah.
So, for you in startup space, AI tech, large language models, not just for you, but developers in that space allows you to go from idea to MVP to validation to traction or not a lot faster.
Yeah, so like it de-risks because like if I'm gonna sit there
of course it does.
Like the amount of money that you have to burn and like FoodBytes MVP was pretty bad. Like it was like it did what it needed to do, which is give out monitoring reports and people would fill them and then it would put them in a dashboard and say good job, like thumbs up, good job, you did a good job today. It was super slow. It was clunky. There was like issues with regards to like certain types of reporting.
I remember those days.
Oh man.
Yes, I do.
Oh, what an embarrassing time. But like using these kind of models now, I don't have to go out and like hire a developer full time. If I want to hire a developer part time, or as myself, just go out and develop part time, but just use this to multiply the productivity that I have as a developer. Because like before, like I mentioned, it would take me like 2 days to like build out like some junky interface that I could like log into and do stuff. I wrote like for Black Anvil, my startup, the interface and like your ability to log in, that was like within an hour. I had like a actual server running. You had the ability to log in, create user accounts, have like authentication and stuff like that. Not like something fancy, just like a simple boilerplate app. And that was within a very short period of time.
So what you're telling me, and I don't want to talk because we can talk about this during another chat as well, but what you're telling me is that you, Matthew, figured out, of course you have, but you figured out how to use AI to develop apps, interfaces a lot quicker, to do it ethically and responsibly, as much as it depends on you or as much as you can control it.
Yeah.
You've got your lab or your setup or your system or your own work process in terms of how you do that. Correct?
That's correct.
So, and I get it. So my question is, how do we go to boring but profitable companies?
Oh no, the worst.
Yes, I know. Hey, they're the backbone of the economy.
Yeah.
So, folks that does maybe $3 million, $3.5 million a year, $500,000 of profit, those kind of folks that you don't really find anywhere on LinkedIn or whatever, but there's quite a few of them. How do you go to them? What should your first message to them be? Because if you go to them and you talk about, it can automate this, they're just going to look at you like you've lost your marbles.
Yes.
It can create content. Now, I don't want it to create content because it's going to steal other people's content, perception. I know it's not true. Where do you even start with somebody like that? I know people that's helping these entrepreneurs adopt AI, and their first part of the process is to have an AI mindset. How would you define an AI mindset?
You can't.
That doesn't help, Matthew.
Wow. Listen. So what my very first mentor, there's a shout out.
Is there something like an AI mindset?
There is. The problem is that you have to differentiate it away from the value proposition. So my very first mentor, John Frost, I remember some words of advice he gave me, and he said, Matthew, businesses never buy technical solutions. They only buy business solutions to their business problems.
Agree, 100%.
So like I remember like Black Anvil's first customer, I went in there and I explained like, hey, I'm building this like super cool AI that can do like all these like gee whiz things to help you with marketing and help you with sales and stuff.
You
The
should
guy's
have
like
invited
leaning
me.
back.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
it was
Yeah, I would
just
have loved to
super
see that.
cringe, super
Yeah.
boring. And I remember the guy just saying like, I don't care. And I was like, well, what do you do for marketing then? And he's like, so like I do radio ads. And I was like, radio ads today, like in 2024. So, okay. So I remember like looking
You
at.
just knew you blew away every one of our radio audiences.
Yes, I know. Good.
I'm just
You
saying.
can find me on LinkedIn. It's Matthew Winchester. You can flame me. Send me all your angsty little messages. Okay, all you radio advertisers, bring it. Listen, the issue is with this particular client. I said, if you're doing radio ads, how do you calculate a return on the investment of the ad?
You
I don't.
can't.
Yeah, he was just like, I don't do that.
No, you can't.
I was like, so how much do you spend on ads? And he's like, oh, and he like could lay out like I spend this much.
Damn right.
Well, then how much does your marketing turn into for revenue every year? Oh, well, we make this much revenue a year. Yeah, I understand you make that much revenue, but you spend that much on marketing to produce leads that lead to that much revenue.
Definitely.
What is the match? Well, you got to spend money in marketing. I think I might see what's going on here.
Okay. Yeah.
So do you actually want to know like what your return is on investment in marketing? He's like, well, no one could do that. And I'm like, I can do that. That's exactly what my thing does. And I showed him how I do it.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden he goes, oh, like that's interesting. I've never thought about that before in my business. And I was like, well, in my startup, once when I had like the ability to take an ROI from marketing and be able to understand what it turns into for sales revenue, now all of a sudden I can go to a bank and I can take a line of credit and say like, hey, like my ads convert at like I put 60 cents in and it leads to $1 revenue for a customer, and that's scalable up to this number. So can I get like a $15,000 line of credit so I can go and pay some money for some ads and then just pay you back off the revenue? Yeah, no problem. So I don't have to like fill out a big, business loan. I don't have to go into like do a whole bunch of snaz or anything like that. Just go into RBC and just say, hey, can I open that up? No problem. So like that, it allowed me to understand from a business point of view, the important thing is to be able to say I'm going to generate content in the form of ads. That content then leads to people subscribing to a newsletter or people just outright buying the product. And then from those, if people subscribe, then people also buy the product at this point or just kick out. And then I could calculate and say, this is how much money I'm making off that. Now, all of a sudden, I actually have like the core piece of the business with regards to revenue generation down kind of like to an algorithm. And now I just have to focus on customer support, customer success, and then just link the two of them together.
Now, you see, and this is what I mentioned earlier when I was talking about AI, and that it changes how you think and it changes how you reason. I know it's an awful choice of words, but still, because, and I agree 100% with you, because normally when you would talk to companies, a few months ago, when you would talk to, it would be about content generation, authentic connections, content, personalized content, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It would sound the same as what it did the last 10 years. Very few things changed again in terms of, let's say you're an agency and you talk to a company or you talk to a client and you say, this is what I do. I've heard too many of those pictures in my life. Seriously, I've got PTSD. But it was all the same damn thing. This is what we do, this is how we do it, how we create it. So what you're doing is, and this is why I find it interesting, is that you're beginning to help that client and more clients, you're beginning to help them. Can I call it a content stack?
Yeah, I mean, like I think of it.
It's like a full content stack. So you can't just develop content and post content and look at your analytics.
Yeah, like
it changes.
It's funny you say like content stack, because like when I think of content stack, like I think of like a lot of people when they think of content stack, they're like, I'm going to hire somebody from like a local community college and they're just going to go on my social media profile and just do like that, like over and over, like every single day, day over day. And it's like, that's kind of cute, but what does that doing for you. Like, sure,
Yeah.
that'll get you eyeballs, and that's great. But
Oranges for oranges?
Yeah, we're not doing that story. That's good.
Okay,
That's
that's
secret.
fine.
That's
Yeah.
secret. We can't talk about that story.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
So yeah, the concept is if you have somebody and they're posting content for you, what is that worth? And is that like something beneficial? Because if you have, like, sometimes it's like the silliest little stories are the things that like really pop off, and a lot of companies don't evaluate why was that so successful versus
I know.
like there's some businesses that just use their social ad space as just a place to dump their ads. And they're
Yep.
like usually jank ads that they use like on like Adobe, and they made like they took a picture
Yep.
and they just put it in, brushed it up, and they're like, this is what I sell. Isn't it cool? It's come on down to my store and buy it. And like that works for some people, but other people want to hear the story. They want to understand more about your business and you as the entrepreneur that's actually leading.
I'll give you 2 examples to support that. So some of the folks that I deal with, one of the questions I always ask them is, of all your media posts, your social media posts, was there one that performed very well and it still confuses you as of today why it performed well?
Everyone's got one of those.
Yes, and they don't know why it performed well.
Mm-hmm.
What I like about your approach, it actually challenged them to start thinking, and that's what I mean by a full stack. It challenged them to think, okay, but why did this perform so well? And what your approach helps them to do is to experiment to understand why it did so well, correct?
Yep.
Because if all of their posts performed that well, yeah, you can measure the return of investment, but the impact will be immediately felt and seen.
It will. The key thing.
And I can give you some really weird examples of posts. I'm not going to do it now, but it was like stuff that you just think like, why did people even respond to it?
Yeah. So like there's some small business owners that like show me like their social media stuff that they post, and then they like give me this soy jack meme face that they like point out and go, oh, like that is like like they hit like a 200 like eyeballs on their post.
Yes.
And then they go like, this is the stuff that people like, and then they keep doing it and they keep hitting like 200 views, 200 views, 200 views.
Yes.
That's not it. That's right. Like you need to branch out. You need more people to get involved.
Correct.
And that's why like I try to suggest them like throwing a hook, throwing a question, throwing like something that allows other people to come and like get a hold of this. Because like if you're just constantly posting like going back to like the easiest stuff to beat up on and bully is like the content where somebody just takes a picture of like the product they're making and they're like, this is cool. I think this is great. Come down over and buy it. That by itself isn't great content because you don't actually know the people that view it, why they're there and why they're looking at it.
That's my point.
Yeah. So like some of the stuff can be things like you're talking about the weather. Some of the things could be like you're talking about a problem at your business. Maybe you're making the product. Maybe it's somebody that came and visited you that day that had a funny story and you want to share it with people. There could be like a lot of different reasons why people engage with your content, and it isn't necessarily you or the products that you necessarily make. It's the way that you tell a story. That's the most important, at least.
I agree 100% with that, but, and this is not aimed at you at all, but if I hear somebody else tell me again, it's about how you tell the story. Like seriously, people know that. What I like about your approach is that you're now beginning to put quantified data behind how you tell your story, correct?
Yeah, and I do take a...
That is a huge change in mindset.
Sure.
Because most companies just put content out there because they believe they have to.
So I take umbrage with something that you said, which is,
Don't.
companies know that they take it. They're like, yes, you're right. Like companies know that they have to do that. People also know that they have to eat healthy and exercise every day, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they do. But like that's what I mean is like there's companies out there that are looking at this saying, okay, yeah, I need to do that. But I get a client and it's like, yeah, I need to do like some online marketing, and he's not paying me right now, and it's like, yeah, I need to do some online marketing, and then I have like a follow-up meeting with him later. I'm like, did you do the thing that I said you should do? Now I never got around to it.
Yep, that happened.
Yeah, and like I get that. Like you're busy. I'm not like blaming or like bullying him or anything like that. Like I get it. It's a busy life, right? But like at the end of the day, it's to recognize that, and the important thing that I'm supposed to be doing as a founder is getting in there and challenging your behavior, and then seeing what is necessary in order to get you to change that behavior, so it creates a positive outcome.
Interesting. Closing remark for today. and leading into our next chat, I enjoy conversations about AI a lot, not just because it's a topical subject. I think it's a challenging, interesting, intriguing subject on so many different levels. Like I said to you, I watched a very good interview last night on France TV, France 24, European station, and some really smart people there, and just how they talked about ethics and issues. I think it's probably one of the most exciting things to learn about. There's also a darker side to it, I know, but for me, I find it very exciting. But I know, and I'm not going to mention names, but I also know somebody that's currently doing research, surveys, with SMEs, small, medium businesses, talking to business owners, asking them, have they adopted AI and do they plan to adopt AI? And 90% of them said, we haven't even thought about it yet. So you and I live in this world. Some folks seems to live in another world. I think it's going to be interesting to see how you get to that, how you convert more people. And I'm not sure if the word convert is the right word either. But
I don't think it is.
It's the first technology that I've seen in my career, in my lifetime, where there's such a. It's not about early adopters and late adopters. It's just through that curve out of the door. This is about, I don't think so. I'm just going to feel free to respond to that whichever way you want, but I still don't have answers how to cross that divide.
I don't know if, like, this is like one of the fundamental questions is like, what does it take in order for somebody to change their behavior? And like, even then, is
Now
that
you're getting to
necessarily positive? Like there
Yes.
is AI necessarily just going to boost everything in every business always? That
Of course
not
not.
necessarily, no. So it's like, is it the right time? Depends on the business. Is the business even interested? And then the key thing I always look at is like, does a business that is interested in adopting it, do they have somebody that they can hand this responsibility off to?
Huge.
Because like, if it's just like,
Huge.
how many times has a business come to me saying like, Matt, we need this resource or we need this asset or something like that, and then I deliver it, and then they go, thank you, and then they like put it on a shelf and it collects dust.
Because you're not there.
Yeah, because I'm not there
there's
doing
nobody
it for
there
them. Yeah.
inside. Yep, exactly.
Because they don't need just that asset. That asset empowers them to do the thing, but they see it as like, well, as long as we have the asset later in a time, we could do the thing that we want to do. So as long as the like whatever program, plan, device, piece of technology, whatever, as long as we adopt that now, then we can always like look at it at a later date and then just swallow the cost, usually under a government program or like something like that. But like that's the key thing for me is like, what champion do you have in your organization that's going to champion this call and that's going to run with it, that they see the value in it? Because if it's just me trying to make sense of it with a business owner, the business owner is shrugging, saying, I guess maybe I could use it, maybe possibly could potentially use it, then.
I agree so much with you there. We'll talk about it next time.
All right.
Fantastic, man. Thank you.
And for everybody listening, this is going to be at least what we think the format's going to be. So let us know below what you guys like about the format and how you like the dynamic that we're trying to play here. And at the same time, feel free to reach out to us anytime you feel like. And you can find us on LinkedIn. And looking forward to the next time. Thanks.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure, Matthew.